Welcome to Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies. I'm Rob Duenas, art director for Game Fan Magazine and Artist Esquire. This is an unedited podcast, which means there is some cursing from time to time, so please be aware. Thanks for listening, and here we go. Okay, let's go. So, why I don't teach people how to draw. Okay, so this came up recently, like 7,000 times on DeviantArt, and I constantly get questions from a lot of up and coming, people getting into art or been drawing for a while. Hey, Rob, why don't you draw or teach us how to draw heads? Or Rob, why don't you teach us how to draw hands? It'd be great if you did a tutorial on how to exactly ink. I mean, take the brush and draw this line and take a thing and do this line, make a long form, DeviantArt post so we can all follow along exactly the way you do it verbatim. And I'm sort of really like against this. And the reason why is, although I think it is great to be able to watch someone that you sort of admire or you really like their artwork, to watch them create something. That's why I do the live streams. When I was a kid, being able to go to Disneyland, and sometimes you see the artists, some of the actual animators doing something, some animation or some Disney art, it was always a treat. And even now in live stream, I mean, look, if like Greg Capullo or Joe Mad was streaming, I would love to watch. However, like even the Nomon DVDs, like the Dave Finch and the Stephen Platt, it isn't so much watching what they're doing that interests me so much as hearing what they have to say. I grew up going to San Diego Comic-Con. I've said this many times, and I would watch artists, in the artist alley sketching all the time. When there was like no one going to this thing. I mean, maybe you had 10,000 people at Comic-Con, maybe, which is a lot of people, but not really. I mean, considering now there's like 150,000 people going. So what I've come to learn the most from when it comes to art isn't so much having basic art demos being done for me, although I've learned from that to some extent. But actually listening to experience and war stories and advice and when someone has created something, being able to actually follow along from their point of view what it was like to make it. My entire podcast format is based off of Todd McFarlane did this thing called Todd Talks, and it was like he had a collection of various pictures and from covers and pages throughout his entire career, from grade school through high school through college, and submission samples and rejection letters, through Spider-Man to Batman Year 2 to Spawn, and he just sort of like walked through it audibly, and I learned so much from that. I mean, it come out in 2006, and I was sort of ending my college career. I started in late 2001 and dragged it out to January of 2007, and I'd sort of found it the month before I was getting out, like around November, December time, and I was like, here all these years I've been going to college, and although I got a lot of really good advice from some select instructors, what Todd was explaining to me was more valuable than all the Noma DVDs that I owned or anything else. So I don't personally believe I need to teach you all how to draw a sphere and a cone and a cube, because frankly, that information is already out there. You all have the internet. If I have directed you to this sketch rant right now, if I have directed you here because you have asked me to teach you how to draw, here is why I will not, because that information is already out there. You got Google, man, or girl. You can find this anywhere. I have made and I will continue to make personal recommendations. If you would like to learn about perspective and construction, which I always feel should be the fundamental basis of your art knowledge, then Scott Robertson, a brilliant illustrator, has a Gnomon DVD that's relatively cheap called Intro to Basic Perspective. Go to Gnomon and buy that and study it for like years, that will really, really benefit your art more than anything else. And there's nothing I can really teach you that isn't already available, other than for some reason sometimes people feel like, well, if Rob would show me, then that would be like more special. But it would be like really painful for me. I'm not that guy. Like what I think is unique, something that you can't get anywhere on the internet except here, is when I show you how I made something. That's the point of this podcast. That's the point of all of this, is so I could show people what I did. And so I can see what I did. Because sometimes, actually, like a lot of the times, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I have a very strong knowledge of all the basics. But when I take on projects, I don't always know how the fuck I'm going to get to what I see in my head. I just go along with it. And that's generally, like I've said before, that's generally why I miss deadlines a lot, because in my head it's so clear, but to get to that point, regardless of complexity or simplicity of the piece involved, whether it's Richie Rich on a dinosaur or it's 45 mascots on a page, they each present their own problems. They each present their own trickery. And the podcast is a way for me to sort of be able to go back and see, well, what did I do? Because I forget. It was zenning out when I make this shit. I have a belief when it comes to teaching. I sort of believe there's like 2 or 3 kinds of people. There are those that are more than qualified. They're masters, right? They're the people that have that are either gifted or have been around long enough or have enough experience that they're able to pass it down. Okay. Scott Robinson would be like one of those cats, in my opinion. I've had some instructors. There was an instructor, Christian Bradley. I think Jerry Bryce was another one of them at AI. These were very good. Now, they all have their personalities, but what they would pass down came from a point of experience and a point of trying to help alleviate, students from making maybe the mistakes that they made. And they worked on real world projects, so they were able to say, look, rather than showing off, here's what I did, it was more like, look, here's what we were tasked with, and here's what it took to actually get it done. Which you're not always going to get in the PR field like DVD land. And at the time, even DVDs were still relatively new, so a lot of that stuff was just kind of coming out. Like the Pixar stuff was like showing you how they did stuff. Before that, all we had was like the art of animation, from Disney and shit. So you had to read a lot into it. And then I think there's another kind. There are people who aren't qualified and teach anyway. And these are the kinds of people that generally just get out of school and they can't find a job, or they don't want to find a job, or, they like being in school, or they, can't find work and they get into a teaching position. Now, that is a 100% rule. I've met some people who did that and then ended up being really great instructors, okay? Because sometimes those kinds of people have a level of patience that artists who are illustrators or commercial artists who know how to do it specifically, like better, maybe, or at a higher level of technical ability. I'm not going to say better, that's a bad word. Maybe they would get impatient, like I do. Like when my father needs help, with this freaking computer, and I'm like, no, you want to do it for them. You can't do that. You can't do the work for the student. So sometimes people like that, they have an extreme knowledge of what they're supposed to be doing, even if they can't do it, right? But they are able to be patient enough to help rise you up. Now, that's fine. But there's another kind of person who isn't qualified and does it anyway, and those are fucking shysters. And I can't name people, right, because I'll be hit somehow. I know it'll come back to bite my ass karmically. But you are out there, people. And I had quite a few instructors at AI who have done it. I've been in art departments for people who sort of came in leadership roles and shouldn't have had a fucking place to be there. And they're just sort of fucking making up their job as they go. Maybe they watch some Gnomon DVDs. I actually had one instructor dropped all those DVDs out of his case once because I was like, man, I just know this fucking syllabus is coming from a goddamn Gnomon DVD. Because I had spent some refund money from my student loans on those things when they first came out. So I like owned them all like legally. You know, I've spent like maybe $3,000, $4,000 on those things. I have a fucking drawer full of all the original ones, you know? And I knew all that material because I was going through it because they were actually explaining how to like use fucking Maya and draw and shit. And I was able to like gleam off that with my work schedule. So those instructors would do that. Or some of them would just, they just bullshit their way. Like they would work for people. Maybe they've worked for people in the past that were knowledgeable. You know, there's a friend of mine, Ray, who's an art director for a company, and you know he has, you know, he gave me my first real job in art, and he has, you know, he was brought up in the art world with a lot of really sound advice, and he listened to it, and it shows, and he passed that along. But I would find people take over they would take over positions that he would leave from. And they would reiterate what he would say, but they would do the opposite because that's what you say. You say those things. But they weren't doing that. And so I would come across a lot of teachers like that who would say things, right, that were right, but do another. I personally feel I'm none of those. I'm not at a point in my career where I feel that I should be teaching anybody specifically how to do things because there's far more people more qualified than me. I don't think I'm a fucking nincompoop. You know, like I'm not a nitwit. I do understand, you know, otherwise I wouldn't explain my process. I do understand how to explain what it is I do. But I also don't fully have the patience to sit there and watch someone stumble over the basics. I never bothered anybody with that part of my art career. You know, if I couldn't do it, I wouldn't bother an instructor to sit there and go like this or like this. I mean, I knew what it was supposed to look like. I just couldn't do it. So I would go off on my little hole, or when I was working security, I would sit in a car and draw all night, just cubes and fucking planes and spheres, cutting things up and drawing, you know, 2-point and 3-point, no characters. I wasn't drawing pictures of Optimus Prime and Batman to impress all my friends or coming up with my own worlds. I would just focus on these basics. So much so to a lot of people that I went to school with, although they felt that, you know, I think from what I've heard, in hindsight now, people come up to me and talk that they felt maybe I was a little cocky or, you know, I had a lot of opinion, but maybe my art didn't back it up. But they see a jump. They see a substantial jump in the last 2 or 3 years in what I've produced because I was able to then, once I fully understood those basics or have an understanding, because you can't just understand and be done with it. You have to continually work and work and work at those things. And by the way, when I do that, when I do continually work and work and work, I fucking use these same DVDs that I'm recommending to you. You know, painting is the only thing that I've sort of taught myself, you know, and I've looked at a few things, but it's really hard to get any kind of serious instruction sort of going to like you know, formal atelier or something like that, which I'm going to do. That's the goal this next year, is to take at least 1, maybe 2 classes somewhere and actually have a fine artist sit down and school my ass and start that process. Over the next 10 years, I can actually get really, really, really much better. But in the meantime, I follow these things, and I just don't feel that I'm the guy to teach you, because you know what's going to happen is if I say, oh, I had one cat who asked me to teach him, and I was like, look, okay, fine, I'll give you personal instruction, right? Here's how much, but we're only gonna need 1 or 2 of these classes, by the way, you know, because I need you to basically like go do this for like a year and then come back. Because I'll give you the shortcuts, but then you need to go off into the universe and then come back and show me your stuff. And I remember the cat in particular would ask me, you know, well, do you use the Loomis method, or do you use the something other method? And I'm like, no, I use the fucking doing it right method, you know, like, and that means like there's really fundamentals. See, shorthand, in my opinion, is when people start to go, well, you know, you got 1 inch away from the eyes and 2 inches from this, and no, so many fucking things. And yeah, that shit's all true. You can get into that, but I found a lot of people tend to do that before they even understand the construction. So they end up like shorthanding their way around facial features or body features or muscle structure or skeleton structure, and they actually don't actually have an understanding of the primitives. You know? So when they do it, it's all like flat shaded art. It's not 3-dimensionally popping off the page. And since I sort of, you know, adhere to like I always like pop art and animation, construction is everything to me. I don't really freaking care about how well I shaded something if it's flat. Like The shading's not important to me. I'm not interested in shaded stuff, you know? I grew up with comics and animation, so to me it's going to be fully colored. I mean, tonally, yeah. I mean, if you're going to get into color and you need to understand value, great. But if you're just talking about straight technical drawing, then you got to understand these fundamentals. And again, I'm not the fucking guy to teach you. You know, pardon to keep, you know, I don't keep cursing and shit, but I don't really know any other way to say it than that. You know, I got some minor advice here really quick, okay? Because I got about 6 more minutes. So here's some personal advice that I think you guys should all take. Because if I've directed you to this podcast, you really need to write this shit down. Ready? Okay. So 1, learn from experience, not from technique. Okay. And what that means is you got to give yourself, you know, when someone says, "Oh, try this or try that," then go try it. Learn from actually doing it and whether it applies to you. Don't say, "Oh, well, I saw a guy do it or a guy say it, so that must fucking be true." Actually, try it. You know, do these things. Here's another one. You must learn to see and not follow. What that means is if you can't tell the difference between, and I've said this many times, if you can't like visually tell the difference between like a Frank Frazetta Death Dealer painting, right, and like a He-Man cartoon, like if you, or the packaging art on the He-Man toys, like, sorry, if you can't fundamentally see the difference between those two things, if you don't know the difference, then you're not going to be able to tell the difference between like your art and something that's sort of like, you know, working. And what I mean, learn to see, not follow, is learn to see what they're saying, what people are trying to accomplish. When I'm doing my podcast and I'm showing you what I'm trying to do, learn to see that method as opposed to being like, well, Rob said use the hard brush. And that's why these tutorials always get so technical that you think, you know, if you just line up the right settings and I just press the pencil so lightly or hard on the paper, that will achieve the effect of actually being able to draw it. And that's not fucking true. So let's find your limits, right? Every time you do something, take on something that you don't know how to do. You know, if you guys all notice in my portfolio, I'll draw like Splatterhouse, and then I'll go draw Richie Rich, and then I'll come back over and draw some hot chicks, right? And then I'll flip back over, you know, and draw some critter shit, and then I'll come back in and do some graphic design. Then I'll flip back over and do some monster spawn stuff. Then I'm going to flip back over and do these watercolor things. I'm trying to find, you know, like what my limits are. I remember I had the hardest time drawing women and hair, you know, not even 10 years, maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, really wasn't working. And I continually pushed myself, especially in the last 2 years, 2008. I remember I was like, I had enough of this. And I fucking just kept working until I found the right thing. So know your limits. Focus on the basics. If you want to get better with your art, you must focus on the basics. That means construction, perspective, basic color theory. You know, if you feel like your characters are flat, shift the plane of perspective. Make your character not dynamic in that his foot is flying in your face. I used to do this shit all the time. Like I do that really crazy Chamba stuff, which is dope, dude, because the guy is really great at it. But sometimes, you know, you can lean on that kind of like over perspective to make up for the fact that you couldn't do something else, you know? So like I always say, like, well, try it from 3 different angles. Take the same pose, do something crazy, and then turn it to the left. You know, maybe do like a low angle shot, a high angle shot. Like start moving your construction a little bit around. Move the camera, the virtual camera. Think about your paper as a volume that you're designing within, a 3-dimensional volume like Maya or 3D Max. Like your art is this stuff that exists in a 3-dimensional volume, not a flat, flimsy, you know, not this crude matter, right? Like Yoda would say. Let's see. Let techniques be a product of problem solving. So rather than saying, hey, you know, what brushes do you use? Do you use Splatter Rob? Do you use this? You know, a lot of the stuff that I've come up with is because I was having problems. Maybe I didn't feel my watercolor was dynamic enough. Maybe I didn't want to use a lot of masking fluid. Maybe I didn't have an airbrush to do a base. So I would come up with different techniques, right, out of like problem solving, not because I would have to go on the net and find some way someone did it before me. I know they did it. If I could just find that one freaking thing, if I can just Google it, if I can Google it enough, I can get it, right? Like if I just had enough Google power, I could find the answers. Sometimes you just get to fucking do the work, you know? And by what I mean is you have to allow yourself to fail. Finally, allow yourself to fail. You know, you don't have to post the failures on the internet, you know, feel bad about it. I have a lot of art I never post, dude, or dudettes. But those techniques come from a lot of failure, you know? And sometimes you can get so good, then people go, oh, I really like the raw stuff. That's That's something else I've been getting lately. Every now and then I get someone goes, Rob, your art back 5 years ago was just far better. And I'm like, great, but you want to pay me for that? Because no one would. And I'll look back at it and I'll be honest, like, well, is there something I'm missing? Maybe there's some dynamics and stuff. I don't feel artists should go backwards. However, you do want to be aware that once you do develop your own techniques, you do start to develop your own style or your own process of creating art, that it's always good to make sure you kind of look backwards a little bit, that you're not lampooning your art too much, that you're kind of taking it so far that your faces are becoming more exaggerated and it starts to look weird, So it's always great to kind of come back to center, And with that, that's the end of this podcast. So on to the next rant. So guys, hey, that's why I don't teach you how to draw. So if you ever have any more questions about it, just hit replay on this podcast. All right, talk later, guys. Bye.